In this video, I compare two compact samplers, the Smpltrek and the KO2. I've used both extensively and shared my creations on my channel. This is not a gear channel, it's a music making channel. So I'm not just looking at a feature-to-feature comparison, and I'm not tallying scores at the end. I'm interested in how these devices help you make music. It's about the process, inspiration, and creativity they bring. Does a device help you get into a flow and make music that you love? That's what matters most to me. Of course, everyone has their own style of making music, and for this comparison, I'm drawing from my personal methods and preferences. The Smpltrek is great for doing many different things, while the KO2 is more limited, but it's great at sparking ideas and is genuinely fun to use. Both have their limits, but the Smpltrek can do more stuff overall, and the KO2 is a bit more inspiring to use. Let's talk about polyphony. Why this matters is because I make the kind of music that requires quite a few layers, and some of them are chords. Having enough polyphony to layer multiple kinds of sounds is important for me, and it might be for you too. The Smpltrek can play 30 sounds at once, which is quite a bit, while the KO2 can only handle 12 monophonic sounds or 6 stereo sounds. Honestly, 6 is way too few sounds for polyphony. What I did with the KO2 was to download and convert all the stereo sounds to mono and re-upload them back to the KO2, which was a massive pain. With the 30 on the Smpltrek, I'm actually not even worried or counting tracks when I'm making songs. When it comes to organizing your sounds, the Smpltrek wins hands down with the SD card because it's so easy to manage on your computer. Plus, it loads sounds faster. The KO2 on the other hand relies on TE's online tool for sample transfer, and it lacks SD card support, which is really limiting when you want to add or remove sounds. Which makes me sometimes feel like I'm using the same sounds over and over on the KO2, whereas I explore more on the Smpltrek. The Smpltrek can store as much as your SD card can hold, which is a lot of samples. And even with an 8GB card, there's plenty of room left. But having that much space is great because I can keep big libraries of sounds. On the other hand, the KO2 only has 64 megabytes of memory.
64 megabytes!
Which is really small in 2024. It's kind of disappointing because these days, memory is cheap. And even just 1GB would be way better than 64 megabytes. So I'm a bit let down by that. Some might say, well, old samplers had those limits, but musicians still make great music with them. That's true. However, the KO2 isn't old, and I don't think this particular 64 megabyte limitation is helpful for making music. But you know, TE is what TE does. When it comes to power, the KO2 uses fewer and smaller batteries compared to the Smpltrek and lasts way longer too. Also, the KO2 can be powered via USB, which is more convenient because USB cables and chargers are common and easy to find. The Smpltrek needs to be powered by a regular wall outlet or a MyVolts adapter, which isn't as convenient as USB-C power. This means I can quite easily bring the KO2 outside of the studio and not worry about power needs. Whereas with the Smpltrek, I've always had a bit of battery anxiety even in my living room or bathroom. Editing on the Smpltrek is frustrating for me. Navigating the Smpltrek feels cumbersome. It seems like it was designed by engineers prioritizing functionality over user-friendliness. In contrast, the KO2 lacks a piano roll screen but offers a simpler way to navigate through recorded notes using plus and minus buttons. For me, this method feels more intuitive and just less stressful. Overall, editing on the Smpltrek drains my energy when I just want to focus on making music. And that's a big one for me. One great feature of the Smpltrek is its ability to act as an audio interface, which I find really useful. I've connected my Google Pixel to the Smpltrek and recorded directly via USB. For instance, if I want to sample a YouTube video, I can play it and record it onto the sample track without much hassle. However, with the KO2, you need a line out or a headphone out to connect it for sampling, which is much less convenient. And also lossy since you have to convert the digital signal to an audio signal and then back to digital on the KO2. Not a huge deal, but it's just the audio engineer side of me being a bit meh. Form factor is a consideration when you want to bring your device somewhere, especially for musical inspiration, even if it's just a couch or bathroom, if that's your thing. The sample track is quite thick compared to the KO2, more than twice as thick. Even though they may appear similar from a top-down view, the thickness significantly affects the feel and portability of the device. The slim design of the KO2 allows it to fit nicely into things like an iPad case, which adds to its portability. But for me, it's not a huge deal because I do most of my music making on my desk. In terms of effects, both the sample track and the KO2 have some limitations. They can only have one insert effect active at a time, but the sample track can actually have two effects simultaneously, an insert effect and a send effect, along with per track EQ. On the other hand, the KO2 has punch-in effects, which are unique and creatively inspiring. These effects manipulate the notes themselves rather than the sound, making them more like MIDI effects than traditional audio effects. So while the sample track offers more simultaneous effects, the KO2's punch effects add a distinctive touch to its capabilities. I really like them. I really appreciate the Smpltrek stem export functionality, which is implemented really well. It's simple and efficient. I can quickly export my samples by removing the SD card, pull the files into my DAW, and I'm done. This process maintains the quality of the samples without any loss since they come in digitally from the sample track itself. In contrast with the KO2, I've had to record each stem individually onto my DAW. It's really tedious and requires manual alignment of the stems. Overall, I much prefer the Smpltrek stem export feature over the KO2's DIY method. Come on, TE!
Throw me a frickin' bone here!
I find that the Smpltrek pads feel more responsive compared to the KO2's Cherry MX switches. The high and low velocity settings on the KO2 I find a bit strange. Why would you need something like that? The Smpltrek pads offer a way superior velocity response. While the KO2 switches have a satisfying clickiness and kinda invite you to play them, the Smpltrek pads definitely feel more comfortable for expressive keyboard and drum playing. The Smpltrek features a proper screen, whereas the KO2 has a more basic LCD style screen with symbols and numeric segments. The Smpltrek's waveform view is particularly impressive. I love being able to see the waveform of the sample and how it looks, especially when I'm slicing up a sample. Navigating and zooming through the waveform using the scroll knobs is a great feature. While the KO2 screen is simpler, it still allows for sample editing based on audio cues. Although it's not as detailed as the Smpltrek's waveform view, it's pretty okay too. Overall, the Smpltrek's waveform display stands out as a superior feature and makes slicing so much more fun. I didn't cover every single detail in this comparison, but what I focus on is what matters most to me when using these devices to make music. There are some features like global tracks on the Smpltreks that I don't personally use but might be useful for you. I also experimented with loop tracks on the Smpltrek, but they didn't fit with my workflow. So consider my perspective as that of a friend who's into music making, giving you advice on whether you should go for the KO2 or the Smpltrek based on your needs. To sum up, I feel like the Smpltrek is better suited for those who play instruments and want to lay down tracks by playing them in. On the other hand, I feel like the KO2 is more geared towards people who slice and sample to create their music, like hip-hop artists. Ultimately, I hope this helps you weigh the pros and cons of both these devices. There's no clear-cut answer, but I'm providing this insight from a music maker's perspective who's used both to make songs rather than just comparing features head-to-head like a tech review. In the end, it's all about personal preference. The KO2 might be more fun for some tasks, but the Smpltrek offers more options for serious music making. Think about the way you like to make music. and how you get and stay inspired while making music. Ultimately, it's about fun and flow, and the one that gives you the most fun and flow is the one you should go with. If you own a Smpltrek or a KO2 or both, let me know in the comments what you think about each device and whether it suits your style of music making. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked the video, subscribe for more. If you like this kind of videos, let me know in the comments.